Welcome to the Stone Church podcast. We are so excited. I'm excited because I am joined here with my good friends, Vanessa Casares and Julie Macias. And we're in a series and we're talking about our different next steps here at Stone that we have as a church. And wherever you're at on the journey of faith, there's a step for us to take. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of joining a serve team and how important that is. But before we get to that, we all have had quite the week. What has happened this week, you guys?
Back to school.
Yes,
School is back in session.
So exciting.
Yes.
Vanessa, what grades are your kids in? What are their names and what grades are they in?
So I've got Roselle, and she started 5th grade this year. And then I've got Xander, who is a kindergartner this year. So I was a mess, but I think we all are, every beginning of the year. But it was just so special that they're going together this year. So really excited about
That's
that.
awesome. What about you?
I've got Madison, who's in 5th grade. And so we're like, oh, it's her last year. And then Olivia, who's following straight behind in 4th.
Wow. And I've got a middle schooler this year. So I'm dying. And then Rowan is in 2nd grade this year. And all of our kids go to the same school this year. And so we tried to be the cool moms.
Yep.
I think we were the cool moms a little bit.
I think
Dad,
we did
For
it.
sure.
and did donuts in the parking lot on the first day of school. We did a bonfire the night before, did donuts and orange juice and milk, and kind of all had a huddle, and then we went into our school. So it's a good start to the year, but that just brings another level of busyness and chaos to the schedules. But we talked about we probably all thrive on routine.
Yeah,
A little bit.
for sure.
Schedules.
Yes.
Rhythm.
Yes.
I feel like by the end of the summer, everyone's stir crazy and nobody knows what they're doing,
What do we do
what they're eating, where
next?
they're going.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So school brings some of that, but definitely makes the season busier. And I think that's really good to talk about as it relates to serving, because that's almost like a badge of honor that everybody wears. Today in our world is just, I'm busy, whether it's school, whether it's summer and you're traveling or work or home, or there's never a shortage of things to do.
Right.
So in the midst of that, why is church and serving so important? And I think, first of all, because the Bible tells us that serving is important, there's a biblical foundation that really commands us to be servants of Christ.
Yes.
Why? Because Jesus, it says in Mark 10:45, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And so if we want to follow in the way of Jesus, we serve. And, when we look at the early church, Acts 2:42 through 47, it says in those early days that, the church grew as they all contributed, as they all used their gifts. And, another example is, as the body of Christ works together, the church is built up
Yes.
as each part does its work. And if you think about a physical body, the neck and the head are of no good without, the bottom to support. And we're not going to go anywhere without legs. And we don't have balance if we don't have toes. Every single part of our body is important and serves a purpose. And I think of serving as, all of us working in our gifts to build up the body of Christ as everybody does their part. And the reason why I asked you guys to be on the podcast is, Julie, you serve as of recent as our First Impressions lead and director here at the Yakima campus. And then Vanessa, you serve as our campus admin, but you have served in pretty much every area of our church since you got here. And, we all have different stories of our upbringing, how we got into church, how we got into serving. And I thought it would be fun to hear just from a couple of different perspectives and how we've all arrived to being on mission with Christ in this area. So Vanessa, share with us a little bit about what was your church experience like growing up? How did you get exposed to serving? How'd you see it growing up? Talk to us.
So I feel like I was born serving kind of in a way. So I grown up in the church my whole life. And so I just always remember being in the church, and my dad was the superintendent of Sunday school, and my mom's an amazing cook. So she always helped in the kitchen. And so I just remember, I can vividly remember being upstairs in the classrooms at our church every Sunday morning for class and helping my dad with like last minute copies or, paperwork. And I just remember washing dishes in the kitchen after my mom, made a meal to feed the church. And so I just always remember being in the church. And I remember, just loving the feeling of being able to serve my church and be with my family. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. And so that's kind of my volunteering and serving experience growing up. And I've just brought it with me as I've, grown and started my own family and where I'm at now. And so that's my serving story.
Yeah. I love that. What about you, Julie?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in the church. I got saved at 17, actually here at Stone Church in youth, which is really awesome. Full circle moment there. But one particular story that I think of when I think of serving is one of my churches that I went to, Newport Church. We served pizza, and it seems like a very simple act of service, but I was able to serve the volunteers that were there, that give them a meal. That particular church didn't have a facility. And so we had to, what we call, bump in and bump out. And part of that was, we'd show up at 3:00, you'd had your lunch or whatever, and then we'd run 6 services. And then at the end of the night, we had to tear everything down, and take it back out. And so part of my serve, opportunities was to serve pizza. And so I helped feed the team and, the community and churchgoers. And one of my favorite memories of that is people would walk by, because we were on PCH. And so people would just walk by and they'd come and grab a slice of pizza, not knowing that what was going on. They heard music and pizza and, and then they'd come check out church, and then their lives were changed forever. So that was one particular thing that really, stuck out to me is, seems so simple, but it's so important. And from that church, one of the family mottos that we have for our family is if you're too big to rap chords, you're too small to be on stage. And so no opportunity and no serving is too great or too small. Just jump in,
So when you hear that we're going to 3 services, you're like,
yeah,
that's no big deal. We used to do 6 services.
We used to do 6 services every Sunday. Yeah.
That is a grind. I mean, I want us to just think about that, because it's not, you didn't have a building that was yours with the chairs set up every week. Somebody was going in there, team was going in there and setting up church, mobile church, 6 services. I mean, you talk about you and Ruben would come home at 1, 2 in the morning by the time you would tear down. That is a level of commitment, and honestly just speaks to how the Lord just captured your life, you know, and it became who you were. And I think I had that a similar experience to Vanessa. In fact, Vanessa's dad was my Sunday school director. I was a recipient of her mom's food many times because we grew up at the same church. Her mom makes the best rice in the world. I will go on record in saying that. But I think one of the beautiful things that I've always said is, serving shapes who you are, and serving and your involvement in the church, it can outlast you. Your kids and their kids and their kids can grow up serving in the local church. And I always say this about serving and about the church in general is we're not a perfect family. The church is not a perfect family because the church is full of humans. And so as long as it's full of humans, there's going to be flaws, there's going to be things, but it's a beautiful family. It's a family worth being a part of. And one of the things that I'm so thankful for is in all my years of growing up literally under the pews, sleeping in church as my parents, my earliest memories are my parents practicing for worship hours and hours on end. We would have church in the morning, we would go home, take a nap, eat really quickly, and then come back for night church. And they're there 2 hours early and they're rehearsing and I'm sleeping under the pews. And sometimes I'd wake up for service. Sometimes they'd leave me sleeping. And it was a grind and it was a lot. And still, the church literally gave me the best childhood of my life. I wouldn't have chosen anything different. And all these years later, I love the church. And, for me, I'm the 4th generation of, people serving in the church that's raising now the 5th generation. And I hope it's the 10th generation. And I think that's an important thing is serving shapes who you are. When you start to serve, when you jump on a team, there's a couple things that happen. I think it helps make a small or a big church feel small.
Absolutely.
Would you say?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I think there's just there's a familiarity you'll get with people that you're serving with every week, whether you're at a meeting or at a, volunteer party, or you're standing by a door next to the same person every week, and you get to know people. But you start to think this way, I don't go to church, I am the church. How does that like change church for us, you know, to have that level of ownership?
Yeah. I mean, I think that when we can have that level of ownership, like for instance, for me, like serving is something that I take really personal because I always try to go back to where, like, why am I serving? And I grew up serving and watching my parents and my family, but for me, it's more like, it's like, this is my relationship with the Lord. And he's given me life and he's given me all these blessings and yes, a ton of hard times, but what am I doing to give back? And like, how am I serving his people? And, apart from community, because we have so many volunteers that literally have joined groups and found forever friends. Like apart from that, you're also like, you're getting to be involved in each other's lives and you're growing. And when you are going through the hard times, you have people that maybe are on your team or just are coming to church for the first time that can encourage you. And so serving is so much more than like, you know, just holding a door open or, you know, holding babies. Like those are incredibly important, but you're also, you know, you're changing your own life. And so it's like, it benefits both ways. And so I think that you can find community, you can find friends, you can like help yourself. And I just think it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I mean, you discover your gifts.
Yeah.
Yes.
You figure out what did God put me on this earth to do? And, you know, I'm so thankful for the church as a place for us to figure out, you know, what is the things that God has naturally wired me to do. And the fact that I get to work those out outside of the church, but in the church as well. Not just, you know, I think before there was this mentality of, you know what, if you don't sing and preach, you can't serve at church.
Right.
There's not a place for you. And there is so, I mean, you can, you know, if you can make free coffee, if you can serve, you can greet, if you can help us pick up trash in between services, you know, the turnaround team. I mean, there is like endless, you know, places for us to serve. Julie, what would be your answer to someone who would say to you, if we're just going to be honest, right? I'm too busy to serve.
Oh, wow.
You know, talk about a season in your life where you just said, no matter what, I'm going to serve.
Yeah. So for me, my most recent season, I went through nursing school, recently graduated, but I had decided that my commitment to serving wouldn't stop. And for that, like when you feel busy, it's you think you have the, you know, the this or that type of a lifestyle, and I have to choose one thing over another. And I said, no, it's an and life. Like, God, you've called me to an and life. I'm not taking away, and I'm not sacrificing anything or any involvement at the church. Like, I'm not going to do it because that's my anchor. You know, that's my anchor to you. I love to serve. It pours out of my heart like crazy. And I'm constantly looking for ways that I can, you know, be a hand or have hand or help, you know, and just use what I have in my hands to help other people, you know, and it's in my profession. It's just part of who I am. And it's not something that I would say that I was taught. You know, it's something that you catch, and you don't catch it unless you do it. You know, you can see it happen, but you know, it's something that's caught, not taught. And I know we talk about that here at Stone a lot. Like, you know, you catch more than what you get from being taught. And for me, I think that's the biggest part. So if you feel busy, you know, yes, but say yes and amen and live the and life, because there's so much more that God has for you if you're willing to just open your hand and say yes.
And you're going to be preaching next Sunday because that was a word. That was such a word.
Yeah, and I feel like the beauty is like when we say yes and when we have an and life, like the Lord supernaturally, like he provides every time. I'm like, how did I, you know, have work and then go to soccer practice and then serve, and like you just do it and you feel so much fulfillment and like joy, and so he just, when you say yes, he provides the way every time, I feel like.
That could not be truer. I have seen so many times, you know, in our lives where it's like, well, you're so busy. Don't you think you should cut back on this? And I'm not a fan of like overextend yourself to the place of burnout.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, you know, we have boundaries and all of that, but there is something to, you know, when you put God first and you say, what I'm not going to sacrifice is my response for everything Christ has done for me in the work that he's called me to do. In whatever way that I can. And sometimes that'll look like a ton. Sometimes it'll look like a little bit. But to say, I love that. That's one of my mottos. I live a both and life. I have to believe that God can call us to being wives, moms, husbands, dads, business owners, nurses, you know, all of these things. And and servants of Christ.
Amen.
And he can increase our capacity for that. Why? Because God can do that supernaturally. And we will find moments in our day where we can make it work.
Yeah.
And in that, there will be so much blessing and faithfulness and obedience to come from that, blessing to come from that obedience. And so I love that. And I want to encourage anybody, even right now, if you feel like I've been making excuses, I have been too busy, give God the benefit of both and say, God, this is what I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to compromise what you've asked me to do in the ways you've asked me to like live out the call that you've given me. And I'm going to have space, and I'm going to have more than enough for anything else that you have placed in my hands. And I love that. I love that. Serving shapes who we are. And I think another thing is serving builds community. You alluded to that. You meet people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. You get to know about each other's lives. And I think, Vanessa, you shared an example of someone who was a faithful servant at our church and just built community by waving at people. I mean, talk about Faithful Phil.
Yeah, Faithful Phil. I mean, when I started serving almost over 5 years ago, he was already here, and he was a parking lot team member, and Phil, we call him Faithful Phil, and he was literally, I think he was here every Sunday, first service. He set out everything. He served every first service, and he was our parking lot guy. And he unexpectedly passed away a couple years ago. And when I found out, I was like in immediate, tears. But what you saw afterwards was like what really got me, because people might not have known him, like face to face, or had full conversations with him, but we'd have people come in and be like, "Hey, there was a guy that used to like wave me in. I haven't seen him in a while." And I'd have to break the unfortunate news, but I saw like Phil probably didn't even know that he was, like making people's mornings by literally just waving them and saying hi as they were coming in. But people saw him and they noticed him, and he probably made a change in their life. And, I hope that, where he's at, he's, we're in heaven, that, he's being able to rejoice and see and, have all those, that reward for just being so faithful and for serving with his heart. And I think that's what it is when we serve. We do it out of, our love and the abundance, that the Lord has given us. And when we do that, man, we're going to make differences that we might not even know that we're doing.
Yeah, I think a really important piece of serving and contributing, to the church, to the place that God has called you to reside in, is that it helps you to build the community that you want to be a part of. And one of the things that I learned when I became a mom, when we were kids, and you're going to events, you have things at your church, or you're part of Little League baseball, or you're part of different organizations, and there's these experiences you have as a kid that are so fun. You go to school and you have like a back to school night or whatever it is. For me, it was church, and there'd be all these like cool events and these decorations, and food would just magically appear, and the music would just be there, and then we'd all be wearing costumes. It'd be like theme nights, and you just always assumed like there's this whole team of magic makers that are in the back that are just making this happen. Then you become a parent. And you realize that the magic makers are just a bunch of parents who work really hard to make this happen for their kids. It's like the Christmas saying that it's like, now that I'm an adult, I realize that the magic of Christmas was just parents who love their kids. And it's just like, I think we can take two different perspectives when it comes to things that we're a part of, like the church. Is we can sit and say, man, I wish that this is what the experience was like. I wish that we had this. I wish that or we can sit and say, I'm going to work to make this the place that I always dreamed of it being. And, one example for me that is not the church, but is just serving in a different capacity, that I've mentioned in my messages before, was when I had the experience of serving as the concessions director for Little League. And, busy Am I too busy for that? Yeah. But who is not too busy for that?
Right.
And what did that require? Man, weekly trips to URM to get nacho chips and popcorn and candy and calling the soft drink guy to come and refill that, learning all of those different things and getting there early to warm up the nacho cheese. But here's what I realize is, when you walk into the baseball park and you want that smell of popcorn, you want to go get a hot dog, you know, you want the big league chew because kids care about the big league chew, you know, it's a big deal. Is that there is somebody who's going to the store and buying the chips, ordering big league chew and praying it gets here on time, so that the kids get to have this experience. And, you know, we get to have this community that we dreamed of being a part of when it comes to something like sports. How much more in the church, you know, do we get to be a part of, actively participating and creating what we always wanted to be a part of?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, we are the laborers. And I love this passage, Ecclesiastes 4:9. It says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. And so I just think, you know, how much, you know, better and more full of life and welcoming could we make things if we decide, well, I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and wish for something. I'm going to actively participate in making that happen. And having that level of ownership, because this is my community. This is our church. And, you know, these are our kids' events and youth events. And, you know, if you're a parent and you're like, I wish that, you know, I wish this was a part of the student experience. I wish families could go on a mission trip. Well, how can we actively be a part of serving in a way that's going to make those things happen? And I think as we work together to do that, we get to be a part of something we always dreamed of, you know, whether it's events or just the culture of our church, what we dream of that being, you know, nothing brings me greater joy than all of us kind of get here early on a Sunday morning and our kids have started to flood my office and they hang out every Sunday morning in there that they're all here. And this, you know, it just, this last Sunday they were eating breakfast in there, and it makes me so happy because my hope is that they're going to grow up with these memories of we'd get to church early. And instead of thinking our poor kids, you know, they're just suffering. You know, they got to just sit in church for a lot longer than the other kids. They're having the time of their lives. And my hope is that they're going to have those memories. And, you know, we can help work to create that. I think that's such a big deal. Another thing that I think of why serving is important is serving impacts eternity. What would you guys say about that? You know, what would you say about just a role or something that you've served in that has impacted or had eternal impact?
I mean, I can't think of maybe like a role that I play, but I've recently started, well, not recently, I've been doing it for a while, serving in youth. I was like the admin, but now I'm kind of just serving as a volunteer. And I think just being able to connect with the youth and hear their stories and pray for them. And I've recently been finding a lot of fulfillment in that because like community beyond, you know, on a Wednesday night, I've got, you know, some girls that will text me and will be like, hey, will you pray for me? Or, hey, I'm going through this. Can you give me some encouragement? And so I think about how I thought, you know, serving youth isn't going to be that big of, you know, I'm just going to watch some kids, right? No, it's like, it's more than that. And so I think when we put ourselves in positions to serve, using our gifts, when we make the sacrifice to be here on a Sunday or on a Wednesday or during the week when we're, you know, when we're busy, when we make that sacrifice, we don't even know what the Lord's doing, you know, the seeds that he's planting.
That's good.
I shared a song with you guys this morning that I remember growing up, and it's an old song, but it's pretty much, it's saying that, you know, this guy took this other guy to heaven. And he's like, I saw you in heaven, and there was people that you didn't even know, you impacted their lives. And they're thanking this guy because they're like, I'm in heaven because you did this. And so I think of how like, it just blows my mind because I'm like, the Lord is using me in ways that I don't even know. And I get the ability to do that. Like, that's literally personally how I take it. I'm like, thank you, Lord, that I get to serve you. You've given me health. You've given me, you know, my breath, and you're doing your will, and you're using me for that. Like, I'm just like, I don't even feel worthy. But that's how I, you know, think about, I don't know what, you know, how many people I'm gonna, you know, come in contact with, or if it changes lives or not, but even if it's just one, like that's more than enough for me.
Yeah, it's great.
And if I can point someone in the direction of the Lord and they make it to heaven too, like I've done, like that's it. I've done everything that I can. And then speaking on back what you did, like imagine if everybody that was here is serving where they think, this could be better, this could be better. Could you imagine what the church would look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
I think about that a lot. I'm like, imagine if everybody served where the Lord, has called them. Like the church would just, it would blow up. What could we do in the valley? Like it's just crazy to think about.
And here's the reality: when you come to a bigger church, a church that's larger than the average church. Even our campuses, the average church size in America is 250 people or less.
Right.
So we're a part of a big community. And I think one of the misconceptions about serving is you'll come and you're like, there's already people in every area. I'm not needed. They have more than enough people. When the statistic is that between 2 and 3% of the people at our church are actively serving.
Right.
So that question of what would our church look like if every person said, God, how can you use me? And again, they're serving outside of the church. I know there are so many people that invite and they are representative of Christ in their community. You're doing outreach. That's all serving. But when it comes to serving in the context of a Sunday morning, a Wednesday night, a Monday night at Young Adults, the impact that we could be making, and even just your heart, Vanessa, of I don't even feel worthy to be able to do this.
Right.
One of the sayings that we have here is we get to do this.
Yes.
We don't have to do this. We get to do this. We get to be a part. And, we, as we were preparing for this podcast, talked about one of the teachers in Kids World that has been so faithful for so many years. And Julie, you talked about just the role that he played in your girls' lives last year.
Yes. Yeah. So last year we did Breakaway and Mr. Mike, he is a faithful Kids World volunteer and just he's almost like a grandpa down there. He just loves on the kids all the time. And you raise your kids and you hope that one day they're going to accept Christ on their own. And I was fortunate to be on the blessing side of Mr. Mike, and my kids gave their lives to Christ at Kids Breakaway, and he led them in their salvation prayer. And what a special moment for me and my life and our family and the direction that they're going on their own. But praise God for Mr. Mike. You know what I mean? Because he just faithfully shows up and just loves on kids. And everybody makes serving so complicated, like, oh, it has to be look like this or it has to be that. And it doesn't have to be. You just show up, and God's going to use you, and and you're radically going to change lives and not even know it. So
he made that same prayer with my son, Rowan, last year. And so came to me and said, hey, I had this moment with Rowan. And, Teacher Mike will never know of the impact and the eternal reward that will come until he is standing in heaven.
Right.
And I think no matter how seemingly small your role is or big, we will just never know. We will never know who came and then came back because of a smile or an interaction or, because of the way that somebody made them feel, because an usher found them a seat, we will never know the impact that we will have. There's a gal that grew up in our youth ministry, and I was leading worship at a winter camp, years ago, and now she's away at college. And she shared with me, years later, when you were leading worship at that winter camp is when I felt God called me to be a worship leader.
Wow.
And this last summer, she led worship at a summer camp full of students, and it ended up being the exact same song that I had been singing that she was leading as she was leading over these kids. And she said, in that moment, God brought to mind that moment where you were singing the very same song, and God had called me when I was out there in the crowd to being a worship leader. And I had this full circle moment where I wondered, is God actually calling me to be a worship leader or is he not? And it was like in that moment, God was like, I did call you and now you're walking in that. And she said, thank you for that moment. Well, I would have never known what God was doing in her heart as I was leading worship. And so when we don't serve, we miss out on those kinds of opportunities because how much life did that bring, for me to know, God, thank you. Thank you for using, me in that way. And there's a story that I want to share because it just speaks of the heroes of our church who serve and hopefully will encourage every person who's listening to jump on a serve team as well, because the work that we do matters and it has eternal impact. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a revivalist tent preacher, and his name was Mordecai Ham. And he was doing a tent revival. You guys remember those? Like the tents out in the park, and then everybody comes. And he was doing one of those in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he, the worship had finished, and it was jam-packed. There was chairs all under this tent. And he was sharing a message, and he was preaching about the love of Jesus, preaching the salvation message. And there was 2 14-year-old boys who were walking by and overheard him, on the microphone talking, and they kind of started to get close, and they wanted to find a seat, but there was nowhere to sit. So they turn around, they start to walk away, and there was an usher whose name nobody knows to this day. Nobody knows his usher's name, but he saw these 2 14-year-old boys. When they started walking away, he ran after them, and he said, "Hey, boys, come back. I'll find 2 seats for you. Don't leave. I'll find 2 seats for you." He goes in, and he looks over, asked people to move, and found 2 seats for these boys. These boys sit down, hear the rest of this message, and at the end of that message, they gave their lives to Jesus, and their lives were forever changed. And those 2 boys' names were Billy Graham and Grady Wilson.
Wow.
And Billy Graham went on to be used to reach more people for Christ than anybody else in human history. Grady Wilson went on to manage and organize all of Billy Graham's crusades.
It's amazing.
For the rest of his entire ministry. The hero of that story is not Mordecai Ham. It's not even Billy Graham or Grady Wilson. The hero of that story is the usher. Who literally chased them down and said, "I have 2 seats for you." And I just think the eternal impact that usher has in heaven today, the harvest that he gets, because think about it, every person that Billy Graham reached, that usher had a part in. And I think, if you're here and you're on the fence, every person that you come in contact and what God's going to do in their life, you are going to have a part in their story. And, that is not over spiritualizing it. That's not making it bigger than what it is. That is what it is.
That is what it is.
The seeds that we sow will reap a harvest. And, Vanessa, you shared this passage. The harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. And so I just, we're going to bring this to a close, but I just want to encourage anybody who is here, who is on the fence of serving, don't miss out on all that God has for you. If you want to know, what's my purpose on this earth? What does God want me to do? Let's actively engage in his mission. And as you're doing that, you will find that. And God will reveal that to you. And there's so much blessing, so much joy, so much purpose that's going to come from that. And so we hope that encourages you, any of our listeners who are out there. We're thankful to be on the serve team until Jesus comes back.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us.